Okay, good morning, everyone. Let's start today's discussion. So today we are talking about financial risk mathematics. So let us just start. So this is the third session of the series which I started on financial mathematics. I thought of covering few important aspects of impact of mathematics on finance. So the first two sessions, just to recall, first session I gave an introduction. And in the second session, I actually spoke about derivative maths. Coming to derivative maths, I'm not sure if I was able to do justice because the subject is extremely vast. A lot of things has been happening and has happened. So I just try to give a sense to the participants in terms of how the mathematics has actually played a role in developing finance as a science and created enormous value by creating many products and understanding risk and defining a lot of new ideas which actually got implemented in the marketplace in last 30-40 years. And then maybe we need to plan some more sessions on the derivative maths. And the first session I actually gave an introduction, as I mentioned, and I'm planning this today and then one more session. So today we are going to talk about the risk mathematics. In the last 10 minutes of my discussion today, I would like to focus on some question answers so that participants please feel free to ask questions, whatever may be the questions. If you can kindly send your questions on chat, it will be good so that I can read it. If the subject, the interest on the subject continues, I would actually we can plan for the sessions actually. So today we are going to discuss risk mathematics or mathematics of potential financial loss. So this is a quite important subject in the industry. And so we have taken two risks, credit and market. So I'm going to define each of them. So people who are actually listening for the first time, I'm picking up the subject matter from ab initio. So I'm not assuming any background in terms of risk. So that you should be able to understand what exactly I'm talking about. So because I just want to lay down general principles which actually is deployed in understanding risk, identifying risk, measuring risk, and controlling risk. So these are some of the steps which are actually required to understand. I am not sure if I'll be able to do both the risk today, but if it is not possible, then we'll continue the next week actually. So let us start. Let's start with the credit risk. So I actually have named as mathematics of potential financial loss. So major risk in financial services, that's the heading. So the first risk type we're looking at is the credit risk. Just to understand credit risk, primarily associated with lending. One of the important function of financial institution is lending. Banks lend, NBFC lend, and NBFCs, the non-banking financial companies, they lend. So essentially, lending is the most important activity which banks they do. And now, if I just define the risk in lending, it can be defined as a monetary loss. So I'm talking about the risk to an entity or to an individual on account of non-payment of interest and or principal amount on the loan when it is due. So that's the basic definition I'm trying to put. That means somebody has taken loan, he or she is required to pay interest and a part of the principal depending upon the terms and conditions of the loan, and he or she is not able to pay because there is a possibility or there's a default, and default can happen for various reasons. We're not discussing the reasons for default here. The second important risk which I want to mention is the market risk. And these are two distinctly different types of risk. Market risk is associated with buying and selling, that is the adverse market movements. Adverse market movements. Just to give you an example, let's say that we buy a stock for 1,000 rupees and the stock price falls to 900 rupees, and we are going to take a loss of 100 rupees. So the market risk is associated with buying and selling adverse, I'm describing as adverse market conditions. And in some cases, even lending can also lead to market risk. That becomes somewhat complicated at this point of time. Let's not get into that at this point. I'm just broadly defining the principles here. The third category of risk is operational risk. I just thought I will just mention this. And these are operational risk is losses due to failure of processes, people, system, that is system failure, legal affairs, or external events. Now, this operational risk is nothing to do with the financial services, although financial services have huge operational risk, but other services, other kind of businesses also have huge operational risk. I don't think that the other industries is seriously, measuring what kind of operational risk they have, but I think they do have operational risk, and the operating environment is rapidly changing, and operational risk has become an important part. For example, COVID-19 is an operational risk, is an external event which has created havoc in the world today, and you can see, this situation is still grim. So today we are going to discuss the first two types of risk, credit and market, and mostly we are actually focusing on credit risk. Let's lay down some general principles of risk management. So general principles behind financial risk management. First thing we need to identify is the identification of the risk. So here again, as you know, in any risk management process, we need to identify, and then we need to, after identification, we need to measure. Now, measurement is where actually it's challenges many times. And after measuring, we actually need to analyze. After analysis, we actually we need to create a threshold. Threshold means, okay, what level of risk we can actually, withstand. And then if the level of risk crosses, then we are actually looking at to control the risk. So these are the different steps in any process: identification, measurement, analysis, and then setting up thresholds, and then the control follows. So again, the identification is what worst can happen to the financial instrument we are holding. Now we're talking about financial instrument, and this I'm using in a general term. It can be a loan, or it can be a foreign exchange, it can be equity, it can be bond, it can be commodities, anything, financial instrument actually. Remember that the financial transactions always take place through a financial instrument. Remember that, quite important to understand. Financial variables, most of them are observable but not controllable. Quite important. Financial variables, for example, equity prices, bond prices, commodity prices, derivative prices, calls, put, whatever, actually, they are observable, but in a liquid and in the efficient market, they are not controllable. I just want to make a distinction. Economic variables, I think people sometimes get confused, because many times, I teach in the class and I find that people get confused between economic variables and are less relevant to the measurement of risk in finance. Quite important actually. When you are looking at risk measurement or risk management in finance, economic variables play a little role in this. Finance variables or financial variables respond to economic variables for us to observe. So what actually happens, whatever happens in the economy, it passes through financial variables. So the economy is not doing well, the financial variables start actually reacting adversely. So the measurement is done through financial variables. The underlying reasons can be economic, and they are economic. Another point I want to mention is that most economic variables are backward looking, and financial variables are forward looking. Quite a huge distinction between two kinds of variables. Financial variables are measurable, economic variables are hugely estimated, and estimates, because of the data is not correct or whatever, actually can be a challenge. Okay. Then once this is done, then we actually have a distribution of losses and gains. So then what we do is we actually plot a distribution. Distribution is nothing but on the x-axis, we talk about the potential losses or the magnitude of losses, and on the y-axis we are talking about the probability of those losses. So they a two-dimensional graph, which actually is a normal distribution or a log normal distribution or exponential distribution, linear distribution, uniform distribution. There are a lot of distributions that depends upon So here we are talking about generally log normal distributions, mostly normal distributions used in the understanding the the market risk, and then some kind of specific distributions are there for understanding the credit risk. So remember, distribution is an important measurement tool which has actually come from statistics, and so focus on, and here distribution focus on potential losses under a different market condition. Now this is important. So what we actually do is we vary the variables in such a manner that it impacts, if the variable goes to a particular value, what happens to the financial instrument. In this particular case, how much losses we can incur. And then we are talking about linear and non-linear contracts, foreign exchange, stocks. They're generally linear contracts. If the variables, that means changes in the risk is directly proportional to the change in the underlying variable. Derivatives are non-linear. Bonds are also non-linear. Commodities are somewhat linear, but derivative on commodities are again becomes non-linear, and a lot of other complex instruments. Second is the measurement. Now measurement, see, the interesting point of the risk in financial services is that we are today here, we would like to measure next 1 year what is the loss distribution looks like. That's what we are actually trying to estimate every day, every month, every now and then. So all we are trying to do is, as the future progresses, what is the expected distribution of the losses? That's what we would like to sort of do. Potential risk is estimated using mostly statistics and mathematics. What is the difference between mathematics? Mathematics is a pure science or a science, more perfect science. Wherever there's an imperfections, it is handed over to statistics, and then statistics take over and then starts dealing with the subject matter in a slightly different manner. Then we are actually talking about for assured time. So when we look at the assumed time rather. So when we look at the risk calculation, we are actually looking at assumed time. That means we want to calculate the risk for next 1 day, next 1 hour, next 1 year. So that is something we need to define. Then we also need to define market condition. And then we also need to define certain confidence interval or confidence level. At what confidence level we would like to measure the risk. It cannot be 100%. It is generally with a 99.9% or 99% or 95%, whatever you decide actually. And that's something we need to discuss further. Under normal, so we just calculate the risk under normal market conditions. If the market is normal, so that we are talking about plus minus 1 standard deviation around the mean. Then we are looking at moderate stressed condition. So here we are talking about 2 to 3 standard deviation. Standard deviation is nothing but it's actually the standard deviation is nothing but square root of variance, which actually is measured statistically based on the past behavior of the underlying. So you can calculate the standard deviation of interest rates, foreign exchange, commodities, and I think last time I mentioned about how to measure the standard deviation. 2 to 3 standard deviation is talking about moderate stressed condition. And then we go to stressed condition, where anything more than 3 to 5 standard deviations are actually stressed condition, and extremely stressed conditions are more than 6 standard deviation. As we see recent events, last month the market actually dropped. We can also call it a black swan event. Scenario analysis of events and possible impact on portfolio of contracts. In case of contracts, credit, we can look at portfolio contract. It makes sense rather than looking at the individual contracts. So let's see exactly how we go about doing this in the next few slides. The other important point I mentioned, irrespective of the risk type, general principles of risk measurement remains same. Whether you're looking at credit risk, market risk, operational risk, liquidity risk, or whatever risk actually you're looking at. Controls are also, I mean, put it this way, that credit risk is difficult to control or hedge. I should put hedge here, or not off, but or. Some financial innovations, for example, there are credit default swaps which are available, but let's not talk about that at this point of time. Then we are talking about market risk. Market risk is somewhat hedging. Now, hedging is a process of risk reduction. Hedging is the process of risk reduction. So you can actually, it's difficult to have a perfect hedge, but largely hedging is a process of risk reduction. So market risk can be hedged. Liquidity is another big risk in crisis situation. So liquidity risk is another very big, sort of thing. Then risk management is extremely important tool of prudent management of financial services. I think the risk management cannot be undermined, but most of the risk management the banks and financial institutions are doing is primarily because of the pressure from the regulators. So that's the theme I understand. So let's look at this diagram. So here I put that this is the normal operating conditions. So if the risk distribution is normal, then this within this 2 standard deviation. So this you're talking about 1 standard deviation. Moderately stressed condition, we operate here. Stressed condition, the operational shift here. And then the extreme conditions will actually, you can see here, this is the normal distribution, and the tails actually become slightly thicker. So the probability of the extreme events, they start actually becoming more than what is understood by normal distribution. So the assumption of normal distribution starts to sort of give up when the extreme conditions are created. That's why it is not, the risk management, the specific or general risk management tools are not applied when the conditions are extreme. So you can see very clearly up to here, everything looks fine. And then subsequently, suddenly the thick tails are now becoming thicker. So there are 3 opposing forces that challenge the credit risk management. This is an interesting slide. I thought I'll just share this with you. Investors who are investing in the financial services, they are looking for higher returns for their investment. In response to that, banks, I've just taken an example of banks are taking greater risk to possibly try to get more returns for the investors who have invested in their stocks or their investments in their venture. In response to the greater risk taken by the banks, regulators are asking banks to put more capital to absorb the risk. Now, when the capital is put, investor is ready to put, but they are looking for higher returns, and this vicious circle goes on. So this is an important part. Let's just give you an example of what really happens in a typical bank. So the bank actually has the major source of bank's revenues are coming from the interest differential. That means the bank is paying some interest on their deposits, on their liabilities, and they make some money on their assets, on the loans, etc., whatever they give actually. And the spread in Indian conditions is of the order of 5 to 6%. So I've assumed that 6% is the spread. Plus they make some fixed income or the fee income, which I've assumed of the order of 1 to 2%. So the total income is 7%, that is 6 plus 1. And then there's a direct and allocated cost of roughly 4%. That is running the operations, salaries, infrastructure cost, and all that actually. So the remaining is 3%. So 3% is the net margin before the credit cost, and general credit cost is of the order of 2.5%. This percentage are of the percentage of assets or liabilities, whatever you want to call it. Okay. The net income is 0.5%. And you can see very clearly the biggest problem is the credit cost. That is the default on the loans which that people have given actually, because the loans are not managed well. And as a result, there is a huge challenge here. The required return on the risk adjusted, this thing is, the investor is looking for 1.5% return. So there is a shortfall of almost 1%, which actually, so I'm just trying to calculate the RAROC, and RAROC is calculated because assuming that the bank is 10 times leveraged and they are looking for a return of 15%. So this is something which actually I thought it's a good idea for us to see. The focus is that the credit cost is huge and it is going up. If you look at public sector banks today, the credit cost is of the order of 6-7% actually. So there is no way that they can make money given the interest differential they make actually. Traditionally, credit risk or the risk of default of a loan or a debt, okay, was measured using what is known as a ratings. So what actually the bankers or general credit managers, they do is they look at the balance sheet and they look at all the financial statement, profit loss account, and for last 3 years, few years, and based on that they assign a credit rating which starts from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, goes up to 10 in some cases, and in some cases goes from 1 to 7. And these ratings are assigned to the borrower, and based on that the interest rate is determined and the credit worthiness is determined. So it's a very coarse scale actually, which has been happening for years and years. That was the time when the volatility in the marketplace, interest rate volatility and the business volatility, was actually much less compared to what we see right now. As a result, some of these measurements are actually has become extremely coarse and difficult to really understand and apply. Losses is principal and interest, disruption of cash flow, we have discussed that, complete or partial payments, that is something we have seen actually. So these are some of the conventional look at these. Now, if you look at the understanding the credit risk terms, when we look at new regime of application of mathematics or statistics in credit risk. So conventional method of credit risk measurement, we are looking at number of things. The credit time horizon of measurement. Time horizon of measurement normally for credit risk is of the order of 1 year, rolling period of 1 year, next 1 year. There's something called distance to default. So we actually would like to measure what is the distance to default. Now, distance to default is given by a measure where from the mean value, this distance to default is measured as a multiple of standard deviation. So if the distance to default is 1 standard deviation, that means the distance to default is close. And once the distance to default is calculated, we can imply probability of default from that, given a distribution. And we have some examples so we can see. The next most important variable we need to measure is, which is the transformation, is the probability of default. So now, from the qualitative measurement of risk, it has become quantitative measurement. It's quite an important shift, and that's what the mathematics actually makes us do that. So probability of default is a value between 0 and 1. 0 means very high credit rating. 1, of course, is the default. And so general acceptations, and I've got some slides you can see. So probability of default is the most important variable to be measured for a borrower. Then we are talking about exposure at default. So we also like to statistically measure this number. That exposure at default is, let's say somebody has taken 1 crore loan, and the loan is being processed for 5 years, a term loan for 5 years, and after 2 years the default is happening or likely to happen. When the default took place, what is the exposure, bank's exposure or the lender's exposure to the counterparty? And that's what the number we are talking about is the exposure at default. A statistical determination of this number is done with the help of statistics. And then we are also describing expected loss. What is the expected loss in a transaction? And we are also estimating unexpected loss. And then we are also actually trying to estimate, through the help of the distributions, exceptional or catastrophic loss or stressed loss. These are the general measurements where the mathematics is deployed to understand the credit risk. Okay, so now let's look at so risk of default of a loan. Borrower failing to make required payment is measured with probability of default. So that's the mathematics. Then loss, we would like to calculate when the default occurs, what is the exposure of the lender, as I mentioned. And we also want to calculate when the loss default occurs, we would like to also measure what is the potential loss. That means loss given default. That means if the default takes place, how much the lender is going to lose. That's actually what is known as the loss given default. And of course, the correlations and other with other assets to get portfolio risk. So we also use correlations. Now, unlike market risk correlations, here the correlations are generally weak. That means generally what we found is that the correlations between two counterparties, that means I've given loan to A and loan to B, the correlation between A and B generally is very weak. Weak correlation is between about 0 to 0.4. 0.4 to about 0.8 is the moderate correlation. Anything more than 0.8 is high correlation. So that's the general range. So in this particular case, generally correlation is the order of 0.15, 12, 13. That is the correlation we found in our analysis between the counterparties. So that means there is a huge diversification available in the credit risk. Here, if you look at I want to give a sense here of the ratings, that is the conventional method and the probability of default. So you can see clearly that if there is a one counterparty, the risk is minimal, and the probability of default is 1 basis point. 1 basis point. 1 basis point is nothing but 100 basis point is 1%. So 0.01%. This is the basis point. Basis point is the smaller unit of percentage. So again, credit grades, if it is 2, then the risk is modest, and you're looking at 2 to 4. Average is 5 to 10. Acceptable is 11 to 15. So if you look at India, it is now as a country, it is coming in this zone somewhere between 10 to 50 basis point. That means 0.1% to 0.5% actually is the credit rating of India here. Acceptable with care. And you can see here, as the ratings go poorer, the default probability goes exponentially higher. Anything. So I actually was asked in the class that what is the probability of default maximum. So we are looking at, 10% is a huge probability of default. Nobody will give loan. So we are talking about 2, 3%, 1%, less than 1% is the probability of default, less than 1%. So that's how the probability of default is actually defined. Now you can see here, as the ratings start to go up, the probability of default starts to fall very rapidly. You can see clearly. So this is a AAA probability. This is the probability of default, and you can see very clearly how the probability of default starts to go up. All right, just to give a sense. This is the credit risk distribution, and you can see here, this is the probability and this is the loss. So here, from here to here, this is an expected loss. Now this is an expected loss. One need to understand expected loss. I'm going to explain a little differently here. And then the second is what is known as from here to here is the unexpected loss. Unexpected loss. So from here to here, that is 0 to this one is okay. I'm sorry, the phone call. Can you see the screen? Harshit? Harshit? All right. So we are talking about the.
Hello.
Yeah. Can you see the
Yes,
screen?
sir, I can see. I can see it.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think there was a
Yes.
phone call which came and anyway. So I was talking about this expected loss. So here we are talking about expected loss. It starts from 0 to almost some value, and then we can calculate that, and I'm going to show you how to calculate it. And then the next is the unexpected loss, and then we are talking about the exceptional loss. So this is how the credit risk distribution looks like. This is very close to, you can say, log normal distribution actually. Okay. Now, what is the characteristic of loss distributions? Normally, distributions are, it is not symmetrical, it is highly skewed, and the distribution has heavy tails. That the probability of large losses reduces very slowly. It doesn't sharply go down. That's an important, and it's not symmetrical, unlike market risk, where the distribution is more or less symmetrical. But in credit risk, is not symmetrical. Why it is symmetrical? Because non-symmetrical. Because just think of it. I'm a lender, and I have given, let's say, 100 crores to someone, and at the interest rate of 10%, let's say. What is my potential earning? 10 crores per year. And what is my potential loss? 100 crores. I can lose the entire amount. So for a gain of 10, I'm actually putting the entire 100 crores at risk. Although the probability of losing 100 crores is very low, because I assume that. But coming to think of it, the loans are highly skewed, because for a gain, 10% gain, I'm actually putting 100 crores at risk actually. So that is where I think the challenges lie for a better risk management actually. So let's look at the expected loss. The expected loss is nothing but a multiplication of probability of default multiplied by exposure at default multiplied by loss given default. What does it mean? So you need to calculate the probability of default and expected value of exposure at default. And if the loss default takes place, how much you can salvage. So what is the recovery rate? 50%, 60%. General sense in the marketplace is that the recovery rate varies from 40% to 60%, depending upon the counterparty. So I have taken as 50% recovery rate. So I have just given an example here, and say that example is let's say $100 million loan is given. The probability of default is 10 basis point, which is 0.1%. And exposure, that means exposure at default, the default has taken place, and exposure at default, or default, assuming that the default, when the exposure default takes place, the exposure will be 70%, that means $70 million. And if the default takes place, we will lose 50% of the money. So the expected loss will be 0.1 into 70% into 50% into $100 million, which comes to $3.5 million. All right. So this is the expected loss calculations, but I've just put some numbers here. I think one really has to calculate. I just want to give a sense of what exactly is the expected loss. Just to understand the difference between expected loss and unexpected loss, let me give you an interesting example. Let's say a person is selling, in a village, he's selling eggs. He gets into cycle, and he produces about 100, 200 eggs every day. He takes a cycle and goes to a nearby town and delivers the egg. By the time eggs are delivered, 2 or 3 eggs, they break. So instead of 100 eggs, he's delivering only 98 eggs. Who pays for that egg? The person who is delivering the egg has to pay, because the person who is taking the egg, he's only going to pay for 98 eggs. So that 2 eggs is nothing but he has to absorb the cost of so that means he has to increase the cost of eggs, so that the cost of 2 eggs can be taken care into the rest of the sale price of rest of the eggs. So that is this 2 eggs is the expected loss. So that means when the banks are lending money, or anybody lending money, so there is an expected loss, and the expected loss must be covered by taking more interest on the other loans, which are actually healthy loans. Let's now talk about unexpected loss. Let's say one of these days he had a small accident on the road, and the entire all the eggs got destroyed. All 100 eggs got destroyed, and then he cannot deliver that day anything. He actually needs a capital to ensure that he is in the business. So in order to continue to be in business, he needs a small capital to make sure that he can again come back, because that day he has not delivered anything. That is what is unexpected loss. So for an unexpected loss, you need what is known as capital. And that's what exactly. So any unexpected loss, banks, they use their own money to make sure that they are in business. Now, let's say the extreme condition where something happened, on the road, or he fell sick or whatever exactly, and the situation has become extremely difficult. So he's going to take exceptional losses, and those losses are to be avoided. And one has to really see how those things actually can be addressed in a proper way. So that's the basic definition of expected loss, unexpected loss, and exceptional losses. So unexpected losses, as I mentioned clearly, is the average total loss over the mean value, and a few standard deviations for the mean at a certain confidence level. So you can see clearly that here, to sum it up, unexpected loss, it's a value at risk at 99.9%. I'm going to discuss value at risk at length in more detail, minus the expected loss. So I have just calculated the value at risk as for example, at 99.9% confidence level is $12 million minus 3.5. So that comes to about $8.5 million is the expected loss for this example by assuming certain variables. So one needs to calculate from the distribution value at risk for expected loss, and the expected loss is nothing but PD into EAD into LGD, and once you have that, you are able to calculate the unexpected loss. So if you look at this, you can see very clearly that this is the expected loss, this is unexpected loss, and this is the stress loss. So this is what actually the credit portfolio actually looks like. Okay, so now let me just take two examples where I'm just talking about credit risk. So we are looking at exposure at default, we're looking at probability of default, we are giving a loss given default, we are looking at distance to default, and then we can assume that the assets can have a normal distribution or can have a log normal distribution. All right, so this is the assumed asset distribution. So let's just spend some time in the Merton model. Okay, so now here I want to say, when does default occur? Default occurs, so this is very important, when the market value of the assets fall below threshold determined by the book value of the liabilities. Quite important to understand this. When the market value of the assets, so for example, I have given loan to somebody, 100 crores loan has been given to someone. This 100 crore loan is deployed in doing some business, and the borrower assumes that there will be an increase in the value of the assets by deploying this loan in something. Now what happens is that if the business doesn't do very well, and if the assets value starts to fall and it becomes below the liability of the bank or liability of the person, then obviously actually the default is, so default triggers when default means the value of the asset at the horizon is less than the required to make the promised payment on the liabilities. All right, if the liabilities are large enough, will imply significant default probability depending upon the risk volatility of the assets. So these are, so we need two things. We need the market value of the assets, we need the volatility of the assets. So with this we can actually use, and we also need the growth rate or leverage, whatever actually. So depending upon what model we are using, you will see exactly. So the leverage ratio, growth rate, horizon, and asset volatility are some of the things which we actually need to determine to calculate the default probability. So let's now, so this same description I have written, and you can see here, this is the market value of the assets, and here you are talking about the liabilities and the equity or the capital, whatever actually. So you can see here the balance is taking place here. So now models for calculation of PD. Let's discuss few models. I've got two models here, and there are a whole lot of models which are available. So in the first model, I'm assuming that the assets is normally distributed, and the future value of the asset is log normally distributed. So I'm taking the normal distribution model. Normal distribution and log normal distribution is nothing but, normal distribution can go from can become negative from the mean value and can become positive. Log normal distribution is nothing but e to the power, that is exponential. When it is raised to the normal distribution, it comes to, we get a normal distribution, a log normal distribution. So you can see here this is the current value of the assets, and if the asset is going like this, so this is the 1 year period, and this is the normal distribution, and you can see here this is the area where, so this is the default threshold. That means the threshold is the liabilities, and if the value of the assets fall below this, the default is likely to take place, and otherwise most of the time the default is not likely to take place. So let's try and do the problem here. So here I put the distance to default is D. A is the value of the asset, 1 plus G is the growth rate in the asset, and B is the value of liability. and SD is the standard deviation of A. So the distance to default is given by A is the value of the asset, the market value of the assets, multiplied by 1 plus G. G is the growth rate, minus B, that is the liability, that is the numerator, divided by the standard deviation of A. All right. And then once you calculate the distance to default, the probability of default can be calculated by cumulative normal distribution of minus D. So you can actually see clearly, you can calculate the probability of default like this. So let's just do the simple calculations, and you can see if you can calculate this. So let's go to the, okay, let's just look at the normal example. Here we are talking about, so that I think this minus sign is not correct here, but this is the equation for the log normal process. So exactly where the distribution is log normal, and here we are the current value of the loan. So we are looking at a forward looking, that means 1 year from now, what is the probability of default? The current probability of default measured 1 year from today. So we actually have this distribution, and using Black-Scholes and Merton model, we actually assume the log normal distribution, and this is what actually distance to default is calculated, and the norm S test, that is the normal standard distribution of minus D, will give us the default probability. All right. So you can see this is the equation, and you can see the PD calculated like this. So let's, okay. So this is the Excel calculation for normal. So the market value of the asset is 10. Please pay attention if you have any doubt, and some of these things I'm going to share as we go along. So 100 units or $100, $100 million, whatever actually is the market value of the loan. The current liability is 80. The asset growth rate is 10%. That means in 1 year, the value of the asset will grow by 10%, and the standard deviation of the asset is 10%. So if I now calculate this, which I've done here, you can see clearly that the B2 is nothing but 100 plus 1 multiplied by 1 plus 10% minus the 80 divided by 10% into B2. All right. So that is the distance to default. Now distance to default is 3 is extremely good. That means 3 standard deviation is distance to default. That means it will take quite a while for distance to default. And then using this calculation, we can really calculate distance to default is nothing but NORM, that is normal standard distribution of minus 3. That gives us a distance to default of 0.135% or 13.5 basis point. Okay, let me just play some games here. So if I make it 80, distance to default will go up because your liability is now more. So you can see distance to default has gone up to 227 basis point. If I actually now make 70 here, you can see here distance to default has come to 0.35, or the distance to default has become almost 4. That means 4, let's make it. So you can see 4 distance to default. If I make it 75, distance to default will slightly go up. So you can see how sensitive is distance to default on the liability and the market value of the assets. If the growth rate goes up, the distance to default goes down further. So you can see here, this is the different. So this is the model which actually is a normal model, which is a Merton model, which actually is used to calculate the value of the or distance to default. And from distance to default, you can imply what is described as probability of default. Let's look at the second model. Here I've used the Merton model. This is natural log, and then we are talking about market value of assets divided by liability plus growth rate minus standard deviation square 2 divided by 2 into t divided by square root of this. Actually should be square root of t. It should be square root of t. So this is nothing but, if you recall the D1 term in the Black-Scholes equation, this is exactly the term which actually measures the distance to default. And again, taking the same example here, I've taken 100 is the asset, market value of the assets, and the book value of the liability is 80, growth rate is 10%. I've taken the same example, and the standard deviation is 10%, time horizon is 1, and distance to default in this case comes to 3.18, and from there I can imply the what is known as the probability of default, again using the same formula, norm S dist this, and then you get the probability of default in basis point. 1% is 100 basis point is 7.33 basis point. So that's the distance to default actually. The presentation, and then I think with this I finish my discussion on the market risk, on the credit risk. And you can see here I put the equations here, and I've done the calculations here, as you can see, but I've just shown you in Excel. This is what actually happens. So we are see how elegantly the statistics has been deployed in order to capture the credit risk. And so this is what actually we are doing here. So this is the Merton model, this is the Black-Scholes model. And so just to summarize, the crux of using the mathematics in finance is nothing but we normally try and understand the behavior of the financial instrument, and once the behavior is understood, we put the entire mathematical and statistical apparatus on the table to see exactly how we can replicate or mimic the behavior of the financial instrument using mathematics. That's what it is. That's the crux of the financial modeling, or capturing the happenings in the real world with the use of mathematics. Once that is done, then you already have captured the models, and then the model variables are actually then changed, and then different scenarios are run, and based on different scenario a distribution is created. And once the distribution is created, then we go into confidence level. We'll say, let's say 99.9% or 95%. What is the expected loss we would like to calculate? And once the expected loss or an estimate of expected loss has come, then we actually see if the let's say estimated expected loss is let's say $100 million in a business, and we don't have capacity to take $100 million loss, then we'll have to review the business or the level of risk we are taking in the business. That's the role of risk management. So that's what is the risk management. Now, I want to conclude that generally the banks are not, or banks or financial institutions worldwide are not managing the risk as well as actually desired, because some of these tools are actually very new, and most of them are actually still in the process of being implemented, and not very seriously implemented, because as I mentioned, most of this risk management actually is become necessary because of the regulatory impetus. Okay, can you share these slides at the end of this session? Actually, I'm going to share all the slides, so very soon I'm going to put it on my website so that you can actually take it. Example of economic. Rupali asks economic of. See, economic variables are inflation, and then look at unemployment rate. In fact, there are a whole lot of economic variables which are actually presented every now and then. So these are all, and most of these are hugely estimated, and I don't think they're appropriately captured because of sometimes the data is not collected properly, or there are a lot of other reasons which actually is economic variables are. If the data collection is good, the economic variables are. But then these are all guesstimates and estimates actually. Okay, didn't exactly catch on which amount is the EAD. See, EAD is actually an amount that means, let's say you give 100 crores loan, and it's a 5 years loan, and the default takes place at the end of 2 years. At the end of 2 years, assume that he has paid $20 million or 20 crores. So that exposure at default will be 80 crores. So whatever he has paid, subtract that amount from the loan, and that's an exposure at default. Okay, is the point of default, or is it at the point of default, or point or amount of loan taken? No, at the point of default actually. Yes, sir. Can you say, is it positively skewed? It is positively skewed. That definitely actually how you want to measure it, and why it is positively skewed. Positively skewed is because what actually happens is that the probability on this side, say for example, on a credit risk, the maximum loss is, you can say exactly that your entire principal is lost. But on the other side, what actually happens is that as you go towards the loss profile, you can see the loss profile actually starts to slowly go down as the probability actually of higher losses, they start to reduce very considerably. So as I mentioned in my example itself, that how much you can actually make, you make only $10 million on a 10% $100 million loan, but the possibility of loss is actually $100 million, 100 plus the loss of interest also actually. So so if you actually think through, you'll get an idea in terms of okay, how is the probability of default? I think I've given, Rupali, I've given examples here. And okay, will these PPTs and Excel will be shared? Yes, I'm going to share this very clearly. How do you know the region of expected? How do we know the region of expected loss, unexpected loss in the business? So expected loss, you can calculate if you know the PD of every loss, you know the EAD of every EAD, you have to statistically estimate based on the either past conditions or theoretical understanding of the loans type. And then LGD is also, actually some of these numbers are also available from the central bank, from based on their estimates. So those things are actually given to you. All you have to calculate is the PD of for each loan. Once the PD is known, PD into LGD into EAD will be the expected loss. So expected loss can be calculated without any problem. Okay, unexpected loss. See, I think I gave examples for expected loss has to be absorbed by in your sales itself. That means in doing the business. That means the other loans which are healthy loans, at the interest rate will go up in that. As a result, if the expected loss is more, you become more expensive for business. Unexpected loss is that loss which is any loss, whatever measure you want to make. Let's say you want to make it 99% confidence level or 95% confidence level, any loss in the distribution after the expected loss. So the region between 99% and the expected loss is what is known as the unexpected loss. How will you calculate LGD? LGD is statistically calculated actually based on in an economy, generally in a particular sector, what will be the loss given default. So as I mentioned, the loss given default varies from 40% to 60%, and that's what actually. So 50% is a good assumption of the loss given default. Okay, now this is an interesting question. If someone asks you what is risk, how should you answer that question? See, risk is nothing but in financial risk is nothing but an estimated loss under different conditions. That's all. So estimated loss has a distribution as depending upon the condition. So normal businesses, when the market or the market variables are within 1 to a standard deviation, you can calculate the losses. It's nothing but expected financial loss in case of distress, and that varies depending upon the magnitude of the distress. So that will be the answer. Slides. How is the choice of confidence level is determined? Choice of confidence level is the regulators also are deciding. For the credit risk, the confidence level is generally 99.9%. But internally, you can have your own confidence level. But depends upon how the tails behave. The confidence level is actually determined. So then, is the market how we will come to know what type of losses occur to major or on standard deviation. See, once you have the distribution, then you can actually equate the distribution to a standard distribution of a known type, a log normal. And once you have that distribution, you can actually imply the standard deviation from there. So once you do the modeling, then you will be able to get to, okay, then how the standard deviation stress losses are determined. Now, this is an important question which I thought I should answer. Stress losses. See, what happens, most of the, the conventional mathematical tool, they start to not behave properly under hugely stressed condition. So in the stress condition, normally stressed scenarios are are simulated, and those under that simulation scenario, the entire credit portfolio actually is suppressed or are subjected to that particular stress, and then resulting losses are determined, and then we can exactly see what is the stress losses. So number of scenarios, and sometimes the scenarios are given by the central bank. Sometimes there is a team in each of the financial institutions where they determine the stress scenario, what can happen, but then the reality is always very difficult to get actually. So that's where I think quite challenge lies really. Why banks almost always insist that the firms it lends to has compensating balances for the bank? I actually don't understand this question, but let me again go through it afterwards. Can we also can you have a shorter duration of 3 months or 8 months for calculating PD? Yeah, you can have shorter duration. You can have 3 months, 9 months. You can definitely have actually. See, normally what happens is that the shorter the duration, what will be the effect actually? So 1 year PD roughly, and 3 month PD will be the half of 1 year PD, because the PD is a measure of probability default actually. So clearly the PD will double only. So essentially, if the PD is, let's say, 50 basis point for 1 year, so in 3 months it will be 25 basis point. So that I'm just roughly telling you exactly. Can you please share the link of your website? I will actually send you that. Will market risk be covered today? No, I don't think I'm covering market risk today. So I will shift the market risk to next week. Can we use distance to default and probability from the stock's balance sheet? Or a better? No, I actually don't think that this is correct. You can't do that. Okay, how the market risk caused by lending? Okay, now this is the question actually. So what happens when you lend? Let's say you lend and the interest rates actually have gone up. Let's say a bond. So the interest rates have gone up, and the value of as the interest rate goes up, the value of the bond starts to go down. So there is a inverse proportional relationship between interest rate and value of the bond. So what has happened is that the money has been given. Now, if you want to get out in between from the bond, what will happen is that you will not get your principal, but you will get a discounted, the much lower value, because on account of the change in the interest rate. So there is a market factor which is always associated with any borrowing and lending. So remember that. Only in the case of loans, where the loans are not marked to market, that means the value of the loan is not calculated in the by the bank by going to the market, things like that. So they don't subject the value of the loan to the yield curve. So that is the reason that the market risk is not taken into account. But otherwise, all the instruments are subject to market risk. So what is the difference between risk and uncertainty? Okay, risk and uncertainties are exactly the same word. Risk is more, uncertainty is more a statistical word, and risk is more English word. So I would think actually in most sense actually they are same. Sir, can you please share the recording sessions? What we are doing is we are editing the recording, so and then we will share as soon as the editing is over. We will share that with you. How much probability can we assume in calculated risk? How much probability can we assume in the calculated risk? See, whatever risk we are calculating is all probability only, exactly, in the sense that is the best estimate given the conditions you have used actually. According to you, sir, after we already have suffered pandemic situation like COVID-19, do you think that the banks will give much more attention to unsystematic risk? I actually, you won't believe that, I've been in the financial industry for about 30 years now. And I can tell you that, we don't learn any message. Everything becomes normal. We forget what actually has happened. So that I'm not very sure if that will happen actually. But how much probability of profit can we assume in calculated risk? No, I don't understand this. Can we throw some light on the 2008 financial crisis and who caused the market to collapse? It's a separate discussion on this. I think there are a lot of things actually came together. I think the a lot of derivative contracts, a lot of leverage and greed, and a lot of concentration of risk in a particular way. And I think liquidity, there are a lot of variables which actually came down. See, basically, the Black-Scholes is actually a model. Somebody asked Black-Scholes model. So Black-Scholes is the general model for a contingent claim, and that has been actually slightly modified to use the credit in the credit risk domain actually. Okay, somebody has asked CVA computation. Actually, let us see if time permits. Next week we can actually give some thought on CVA. So we can do that. Thank you very much, sir. SBI call option now at 7%. Okay, we can actually discuss this separately. I think with this I've finished my time. I thank you all the participants for wonderful participation. And if there are any questions, please do send me. I'm very happy to speak to you, and then we'll actually take look forward for the next week. And thank you very much. Take care and have a nice evening and rest of the week. Thank you.